Hello and welcome to another episode of the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. This is John Chance. My guest today is Mindy Weinstein. She's a leading expert in digital marketing and has been named as one of the top women in the industry globally. She's the founder of the digital marketing firm Market MindShift and author of a book we're going to talk about today, The Power of Scarcity, Leveraging Urgency and Demand to Influence Customer Decisions. So, Mindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, probably the premier book on this topic, I'm sure you're familiar with Robert Cialdini's influence.
Yes.
He certainly lists scarcity as one of the factors, and you start with scarcity as an influence factor for chapter 1. So you want to unpack that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so Dr. Cialdini, he endorsed the book. So he is definitely someone that I have talked with often. But what happened is I was researching and working on my PhD because that's really how this all came about. Was I was looking at the influence factors and what motivates consumers, and I came across scarcity. And as I dug more into research, I realized that of all the different factors that cause us to make decisions, scarcity appears to be the most powerful because it's actually primal. It's something that our
Mhm.
ancestors even dealt with scarcity, and still today we get the same type of emotions and reactions, even if it's a product that's scarce. I'm not talking about like survival and all of those things, but actually,
But you're saying that's where it started to some
right,
degree,
right.
right? I mean, it's
Yes.
like, are we going to have enough food to eat? Is there going to be water where we're going? So that's probably where it started, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's the thing. Our ancestors, in the early days of humankind, they were trying to survive by looking for scarce resources, shelter, water, food. And then when you look at even just the empires that have ruled over the years, the ones that had control is usually because they had control of food and water. And so
Yeah.
we are hardwired to respond to scarcity.
So I don't know if Robert told you this story. He was actually on my show years ago, and he actually said he wrote the book because he was tired of seeing people be
Mhm.
influenced, and it was supposed to be more of a consumer guide, right,
Yeah.
to how to not be influenced. It of course turned into one of the Bibles for
Right.
marketers to use to influence
Right.
people. So, h- how do you deal with the idea that influence
Mhm.
sometimes is used in a negative way?
Yes, and that was actually something that I had on my mind, as I was working on this book, is because I also don't want there to be fake scarcity, as
Right,
people
right,
realize, like,
right.
oh, this is really powerful. So I'm just going to make everything limited quantity and everything selling out fast. And so I really warn against that in the
Yeah,
book because you think about today's day and age. I mean, we can look up companies easily. If someone's not happy, they're going to post on social, they're going to post on review
right.
sites. So really doing anything that's false, in terms of marketing, saying that something's running out, it's not, it backfires. And it's one
Yeah.
of those, it's harder to improve your reputation. So for me, like one of the things I look at with this book is I go back and forth because all of us, we're all consumers too. Even being in business, we're consumers too. So I wear both hats, is that I really want to educate people on both sides. So there are times that scarcity, they can be really beneficial, informing customers that, yes,
Right.
this event, there's only so many seats left. That was someone I had interviewed, and he talked about these great events that he does. And he said, we've gotten to the point that our members want to hear from us. They want to know if they're running out because they don't want to miss their chance. And so there's a lot of benefit too, but
Yeah.
definitely needs to be above board and ethical.
Well, yeah, I mean, how many Black Friday emails are we still getting today on Monday, right? Saying the Black
Right.
Friday sale, only one more day left. It's like, wait, this is like Monday.
Yeah, today's
Um,
Monday.
so the term FOMO has certainly
Mhm.
become in the lexicon. Fear of missing
Yes.
out is social media, of course. I think amplified that because we could see what we were missing out so easily
Right.
on. Right? Um, you suggested it's very motivated by another human behavior, and that we're quite often more afraid of what we might lose than what we might gain in something. So, how does that drive this idea of scarcity?
Yeah. So, FOMO, like you said, we all know FOMO, we've heard it, but it's actually based on a deeper psychological theory known as loss aversion. And
Hmm.
so, as humans, we are naturally more prone to feeling stronger about a potential loss than even we are a potential gain. And the example I like to give because a lot of times when I say that, I have people go, really? Like, but I get really excited when I get things. But if you think about this way, because we've all been in the situation where you might be walking on the sidewalk or in a parking lot and you find, let's say, a $20 bill. You're like, you look around, there's no one there, and you're like, okay, great. This is amazing. You're excited. You put it in your pocket. But we've also all been in that situation where we've misplaced a $20 bill. And that feeling that you have for losing that is actually a lot stronger than it is that feeling of excitement when you've gained something. And so we're just wired that way. And that's why FOMO is a thing, but it's based on loss aversion.
Well, and you hear a lot of marketers jokingly, half jokingly, talk about the idea that you need to sell painkillers instead of vitamins. That
Mhm.
people will try to get rid of pain or rid of something that is really nagging them at the moment, rather than like taking the wellness path, right? That maybe is a
Right.
long term fix. So I mean, is that a little bit of it too that drives some of the scarcity idea?
Yes, and it's actually even it's so it is that fear of loss, but it is like you said, it's more of that, okay, this is a quick fix. I'm going to
Right.
buy this, I'm going to feel better. But there's also something that it complements everything we're talking about, and it's our anticipated regret. So what happens sometimes if we're faced with, like you're talking about the Black Friday, you get a Black Friday text message and you're looking at something and it does kind of interest you. Now you go through well, if I don't buy this, am
Right.
I going to regret it? And you start to anticipate how you're going to feel. And so that anticipated regret and the fear of loss, it really does motivate us then to take that quick action. But what's very interesting is what we found through research is that regret or anticipated regret of not taking action is actually short lived. So
Yeah.
we might feel like, this, we're really going to regret this, but you're probably not,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
24 hours, even like maybe a couple hours later, you're like, okay, well, I'm glad I didn't buy that. So those are good reminders from a consumer point of view, but it's also good to know that from the business perspective as well.
So what are some examples that you've seen? I guess we could go both good and
Mhm.
bad
Yeah.
uses of this idea of scarcity. I mean, we're all familiar with like the countdown
Yes.
clock and the limited seats and
Hmm.
the little thing that pops up like I just bought some concert tickets and said this show is selling really fast. Better
Yeah.
get it, today. So, what are some examples, I suppose, both good and bad uses of
Yeah.
tactics of scarcity?
Right. And so, it's important too to understand. I'm going to give you examples, but there's really four different types of scarcity. And that's really important to understand as I'm going through the examples. So there's time related scarcity. So that would be the countdown timer that you're talking about.
Right.
Or the other thing, though, with time related are products that are only available a certain amount of time.
Mm.
And I like to think about McDonald's. I give that example all the time because everyone knows the McRib. We all know the McRib. It came out recently. It was on a farewell tour. It had been on a farewell tour a few other times throughout the years. And so that's only available a certain amount of time. So anything that's a time restriction. So it could just be a limited time offering. The pumpkin spice latte, the peppermint bark at Trader Joe's. I think of all these things, but that's really time related. But then you have also supply related, and that is really where there is a limited quantity, and it could be because of a supply shortage or an intentional restriction. So
Right.
that's where things like drops come into play. Like Nike will have a drop.
Yeah.
That's limited or that's supply related. And what that does is that really speaks to people who want to be different and unique, have some self expression. They don't want what everyone else has. And then on top of that, there's limited edition, which is part of supply related. And I mean, I even went to the store and there was a limited edition Sprite for the holidays, like cranberry Sprite. So it's any kind of twist, but it still elicits scarcity, all of these examples, because it's something that you can't always get. And then finally, there's really demand related scarcity. And examples of those are anytime you have a wait list or you show something has been restocked or
Hmm.
you show that something is selling out, those are demand related scarcity. So all of the things when I think about scarcity, sometimes it's just a matter of how we word things, or as a marketer, it could be something we want to create some fun and excitement with, like the McRib. It could be lots of different ways to use it.
And really, as I listen to you describe those different ways, I mean, a lot of them have intentionality to them,
Mhm.
don't they? I mean, so like how many software companies launch They don't do it so much anymore. When it was a little more unique, some of the SaaS companies would
Yeah.
launch with a wait list.
Right.
Even if there really was no, reason for a
Yes.
wait list, it was the forced wait list that wanted you to get in, more. So
Right.
is that, I mean, that's obviously clearly an example of the wait listing, but is that also an intentional use that's actually probably false in one hand, but is driving an objective on the other hand?
So that's where you got to be careful. So I mean, yes, it is something that you are creating, but it could be truly. I know some companies, if it's a product, especially, that you're going to have a wait list. I think about the Ford Bronco. There was
Hmm.
another one I just read that's like a 2-year wait list. I mean,
Right.
so you have those
Rivian
issues.
electric trucks. Yeah.
Right. So with some of those, yeah, I mean, it is going to be manufactured scarcity. And I think consumers do know that in certain situations, but then it becomes more of like they're now on the wait list, or if it's something where they can get an exclusive access. Or do you remember when Clubhouse came out, the
Hmm.
app
Hmm.
Clubhouse,
Hmm.
that was invite only? And so
Right.
that was still actually scarcity because it was exclusive. And
Right.
that would fall under supply related because only, you had to be special and be invited. And so those definitely fall into that, but they still elicit those feelings because from our brain and how it's made up is that when we're faced with something that's harder to get, we are going to focus on that and we're going to also equate that with value. And so again, it's just automatic. And we've even seen that in brain scans.
So, as a consumer, let's kind of flip this around. I feel like we've been talking about marketers now. As a
Yes.
consumer, is there a way to, it's like when you're experiencing FOMO, do this, a way to kind of avoid making the impulses that often, come from it?
Oh, yes. And, one thing that I want to just admit right away is that, I'm a researcher. I wrote this book. I'm a marketer. I'm all these things, but I'm a consumer and I still get caught up
Sure.
in it. So
Sure.
I'll
Sure.
tell you some of
Right.
the things that we know from research because scarcity is that powerful. But what we know is that again, that feeling that you're going to have, the missing out, the first thing is recognizing that that's driving a decision. That's the first. Well, that's like all things. Recognize that you have a problem. No, recognize that there
Yeah,
is
sure.
some FOMO involved and ask yourself, what is the motivation behind this purchase? Is it truly because I want it or is it because I'm fearful that I'll miss out on something? That's the first thing. And then the second thing, if it's something that you can wait on, wait 24 hours. That's generally what I recommend. Don't buy anything, wait 24 hours. The next day, if it's truly still something you want, then that's the time then to consider budget obviously comes into mind, but is this something worth buying? And then that other thing that I talked about, knowing that that feeling is short lived, that you're not going to continue to feel like you're going to miss out, knowing that really equips you to make more like informed decisions. And actually, I think I said I had three, but I have a fourth one to throw in there. And this is just being an informed consumer. There's
Right.
so much, we know there's so much research and so much information you could find online. If you feel like, okay, this seems like a really good deal, don't hit the buy button right away. Look at what some of the prices have been previously for that product. Have there been similar sales? Are there different places you can buy it? And that just helps equip you when you're making those decisions.
Flipping back to marketers, I mean, is there a point at which people start seeing the countdown clock and go, "That's
Mhm.
BS," that actually makes me not really a fan of your brand? I mean, even if maybe it's, well, let's just assume it's real,
Mhm.
that there really is a countdown clock, that you really are going to stick to what you said. Still using those tactics, is there a risk of people are just so sick of them now that it kind of tarnishes the brand, even if it's valid?
Yeah. So, and that's a great question. Using is the same tactic too much, yes, it can backfire because people fatigue with that. And even, companies that continue to offer the same coupons and same promotions, you start to value that product or service based on that discount versus what you would normally charge. And so your customers aren't going to think of it as valuable. But when you use them periodically, they do help. Like I know one company, they are an e-bike company. So they sell mainly online and they do countdown timers just to show when the sale ends. So they're already
Right.
doing the sale. They just added that additional item on there. And talking to the CEO, he said it's amazing when we do that. He goes, sales increased by 40%. So it's like
Yeah.
people do know that. And we all have a love hate relationship with them. I know as customers, like we hate them, but then we're still going to buy during that time period
Yeah.
too, because we're now competing with the clock. But it's just a matter of not using the same, approach and tactic over and over again. And also knowing your audience, because
Hmm.
like supply related is really good. Like I said, for people who want to be unique, self-expression, things that are popular, high demand, those are people who want to be part of a group, and conform. Time related works for just about anything, except for luxury items. Usually that doesn't really speak to those buyers.
Yeah.
And so knowing a little bit about your audience really does help with that when you're thinking about which tactic should I use and will it work and will people just be irritated or not.
So let's flip this around a little bit, and I think you've alluded to it some, but for some people, when everybody is having FOMO, that's
Mhm.
when they want to like bail, right? So it's like, what's the punchline of the joke? Like, this place is dead. Everybody goes there now.
Yeah.
Um, and so, how do you, in some ways, use scarcity as a like, you know, differentiator
Mhm.
without it just becoming, turning off your truest fans, so to speak?
Right. Right. And that's a huge thing that luxury brands have had to deal with.
Yeah.
There was a case a while ago about Christian Dior and seeing that their colognes and perfumes were in grocery stores,
Right,
and that
right,
was a
right.
problem. And so
Yeah.
it's distribution issue. And so for brands, uh, just going back, like to kind of just clarify a little bit more of what I found from research, if you have a product or or really it's a product, that's more conspicuous consumption. So something someone's going to wear and show off or
Right.
carry around, or, things, electronics usually fall into that. Well, that is very much going to speak to those people who don't want to be like everyone else. And so you do have to keep that in mind. And it's that balance between, do restrict, they restrict supplies. That's why they do drops and things like that. But just knowing that that's who you're going to be speaking to, you're not going to turn those people off by doing that, because you're actually going to continue to draw them in because of that. But then going to like what you're talking about, well, if something becomes really popular and people want to be different, well, it depends what it is. Like there's actually a jewelry company that I talked with the CEO, and that is still conspicuous consumption. But at the same time, this particular brand, very popular with celebrities. So then you have the whole consumer base who want to be
Mm,
like this, these different people.
right.
And so they found that actually one of their biggest assets as a company was they were having a hard time staying in stock. And so they were constantly
Sure.
restocking, and they were letting customers know. And when I talked to the founder of that company, she said that it was when we sent out an email and it just said restocked, in the subject line, and just sales, they already like sold out again. And so
Sure.
it so depends on the audience and the product,
Yeah.
but some of that's going to come down to testing, see what works
Sure.
and resonates with your customers.
It's interesting you mentioned the distribution element, Dior. One example that comes to mind, and for me, was Krispy Kreme donuts. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yes.
that.
Oh, yes.
They had like a cult following. I mean, that people would go to the stores because the only place you could get them is stores. You'd watch them by the millions being
Right.
made, and it was almost a partly experience. And all of a sudden they were like, let's sell them in gas stations.
Mhm.
And it kind of killed the brand.
Right.
Frankly, I mean, they probably still sell billions, that way, six at a time, but it killed the appeal of the
Mhm.
brand, so to speak.
And it was the experience
Yeah.
too. I mean, I remember going, and if you'd wait in line, you could watch them go through the conveyor belt. They
Right.
would give you your hot donut as you were there. And so yeah, it lost a little bit of that luster, I guess you
Yeah.
could say.
Yeah. So, Mindy, I appreciate you stopping by the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. You want to tell people where they can find the Power of Scarcity and maybe connect with you in some other ways?
Yes. So I make it really easy. Just go to powerofscarcity.com. That will take you to a page where it has my book. You can order it, but also has all my contact information there too. But that's the best place. So powerofscarcity.com.
Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate you taking a few moments to stop by the podcast, and hopefully we'll run into you in real life one of these days out there on the road.
I would love that.